So today, inshallah, we'll be discussing the third letter, which is the letter Ra. Can everybody see my presentation? Everybody can see yeah? Okay, good. Okay, so we have this is the last of the istifa letters that can be sometimes heavy. It is the letter Ra. And again, the Ra is going to have its own conditions, which are different to the Lam and different, alhamdulillah, different to the Alif. The Ra tends to have a bit more detail, so it will take me a little bit longer, but inshallah, stay with me. You'll notice there is a general pattern which does make it easy to remember. So when it comes to the Ra, first of all, how do we make the heavy and the light Ra? This is similar to how we talked about the Lam. So with the light Ra, remember we've mentioned this many times when we talk about light letters, how the back of the tongue is relaxed. It's open, the back of the mouth is very open, no constriction, no tension, no lifting of the back of the tongue, none of that. Everything is just, and it's literally just the front of the tongue, the tarful lisan, which actually just lifts up, touches the makharij, and then it's going to come down. That's all it is. It's just the movement of the front of the tongue. Everything else is relaxed. The difference is when we are making the Ra heavy. When we make the Ra heavy, the front of the tongue now, there's no change really with what's going on with the front of the tongue. But now you'll notice with the back of the tongue, there is a massive difference. The back of the tongue is now being lifted. You've got the constriction where the root of the tongue is pushing backwards. And you've also got this curvature or this dip in the middle of the tongue because you've got the front of the tongue coming up, back of the tongue coming up. And so the middle of the tongue, there's this like dip on it. So when we say the light Ra, we're saying re, 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 nice and light. When we say the Ra, we say Ra. We don't say Ra. Ra is light. We don't say Ra. We say Ra. Ra. You see this R kind of ending. You can have a go. Please feel free. And actually, I would encourage you, whenever I say it, just say it after me to yourself, inshallah. So re, 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 you'll notice just the front of the tongue is flicking up. Re, re, re. And then you have the heavy Ra, 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 Ra. Now you feel something going on at the back as well. Okay. The Ra is heavy in 8 cases, and in 4 cases it is light. And there are a couple of cases that we need to, well, 3 cases in total that we need to discuss, where actually you have an option where you can make it heavy or light. So both apply. So we'll discuss these now, inshallah. When can the Ra be, when is the Ra pronounced heavy? The first one is when the Ra has a fatha. Now, one thing that makes it a bit easy to remember is with the lam. Remember with the lam, we were talking about when the lam is heavy, and we said when the lam is in the name of Allah, we look at the haraka before it, right, of the letter before it. If the letter before it has a fatha or a dhamma, something at the top, a zabar or a pesh, right, then we make the lam heavy. It's the same haraka we're considering now. So if the ra has it at the top, if it's got a fatha, and you'll see on the next slide, even when it has a dhamma, then we make the ra heavy. So what's an example of when the ra has a fatha? The word rasul. Ra. Ra has a fatha, we say rasul. We don't say rasul. Rasul would be wrong. Ra. Rasul. Okay. Also, sometimes you will find that the ra itself does not have a haraka. Whenever the ra has a sukoon or a jazm, that's just joining it, now we're a little bit stuck. How do we deal with the ra? In this case, all you're doing is you're moving, just like we did for the lam, you look at the letter before and check what that's got. So in this case, the ya before it has a fatha. Here, if the letter before, let me go back a bit. If the ra has a sukoon and you check the letter before and the letter before has a fatha, then the ra is heavy. So here we do not say yer, yer. This is wrong because the ra is light. We need to pronounce it heavy. We say ya, yer, yer, yarju, yarju. Notice I'm not saying yaw. I'm not saying yarju. You don't say yaw because now you're making the ya heavy too. This is very easy to do, which is why I'm mentioning it. Make sure you say ya, ya, ya. It's nice and light. Ya, ya, ya. And then yar, yar, yar,
Yarju,
yarju, yar.
yarju.
Okay, so please do have a go at that as we are reciting. The next example is sometimes for this word, the ra has a kasra. But if we're stopping on this word, like when we recite Surah Al-Asr, we say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر. I'm stopping on the ra. I'm pronouncing it with a sukoon. Okay, so the rule is okay, if it has a sukoon, check the letter before. There are sometimes cases where you'll check the letter before and there's still a sukoon. And you're thinking, oh, okay, now what? Well, you just keep following along. So now you check the letter before that one, and this time it has a fatha. So it's still a fatha. So even when the ra has a sukoon and the letter before it has a sukoon, then you check the letter before that one, and if it has a fatha, the ra is still heavy. So in this case, we don't say wal asr, we say وَالْعَصْرِ. The ra is heavy. وَالْعَصْرِ. وَالْعَصْرِ. The ra is heavy. And this is the odd one. Okay, so far, number 1, 2, and 3 are all to do with fathat, all to do with the fatha, right? If the ra has a fatha, or if the ra has a sukoon, but there's a fatha before it, or the ra has a sukoon and the letter before it has a sukoon, but the letter before that has a fatha. So number 1, 2, and 3 are all to do with fathas. The last one is not. This one is saying, supposing you have what we call an incidental kasra. In Arabic, they call this kasra arida. Kasra arida is the other way we could refer to it in English instead of incidental kasra is you could even call it a temporary kasra. A kasra which actually isn't originally part of the actual construction that we see before us. So it's a kasra that's been added for some other reason. It's not actually there originally. So for example, in this word, in this example that we have the actual word is actually liman. The actual word is liman. The noon is supposed to have a sukoon. Now, of course, this is why we start studying Arabic, because once you start your study of the Arabic language, noticing these kind of rules will become easier, inshallah. So if you haven't started your journey in Arabic, I would strongly encourage you to start as soon as you can, inshallah. So the noon originally has a sukoon. And then you'll notice that the next word, irtada, let me just write it. I don't know what I'm doing at the end there. Let me do that again. Ir, there we go. Irtada. Okay, with this word, the ra has a sukoon and it needs to be joint. So if I'm reading from liman, when I get to the noon, liman, I want to join the ra to the noon. The problem is now the sukoon on the noon doesn't allow. I'm saying liman, narar. We don't normally do that. We don't join two sukoons. And two sukoons, actually, the Arabs don't like it. In the Arabic language, we do not have two sukoons. And so as a solution, sometimes what happens is there are different solutions of what to do with iltiqa or sakinain, or when you have two sukoons together. In this case, the kasra is added, and the kasra is added to make it easy. Because if you say lima ni, now the ni can be joined to the ra, lima nir, and it makes it easier because you can actually pronounce it. So this kasra actually is not originally there; it's been put there just to make the pronunciation easier, to give you that fluency and to give the ra something to join. If that's the case, if the ra has a kasra arida, a kasra which is not original, but a kasra that's been added there to help with the reading of the Quran, then the ra is heavy. So even though the ra has a kasra before it, and you'll see that we're actually generally the rule for ra is when it has a kasra before it, most of the time we make the ra light. But there are some occasions you don't, and this is one of them. When the kasra is not an original kasra, then the same rule, the original rule does not apply. And so this ra is heavy. The other way actually to remember it, and this is easier for us non-Arabs. If you're a non-Arab and actually if you're Arabic, you haven't started the journey yet and you want an even easier way to remember this, there is an easier way. And that is if you see the letter ra and it has this hamzatul wasl before it. If it's got this hamzatul wasl before it, that's your giveaway. Okay. If as soon as you see this hamzatul wasl, this alif with the squiggly line on top, when you see the hamzatul wasl before the ra, notice there is no lam. It's just the hamzatul wasl on its own. Okay. When you see the hamzatul wasl on its own before a ra, then always guarantee the ra is heavy. Okay, so that's another sort of like a cheat method that you can use, inshallah. So here we do not say limanir. This is wrong. Because the ra is light. You need to make it heavy. Limanir, limanir, tada, limanir, tada. Okay, so the ra is heavy. So this is like your odd rule that you need to remember. When we come to the next three, they are very similar to the first three. Okay, so you know the first three that we did with regards to the fatha, we have the same three, but instead of talking about fatha this time, it's talking about the dhamma. Okay, so if the ra has a dhamma, before we had category number one was if the ra has a fatha. If the ra has a fatha, then it's heavy. So the same thing for the dhamma. If the ra has a dhamma, we make it heavy. The second rule, number two, was if the ra has a sukoon, but it has a fatha, sorry, before it. Same thing here. If the ra has a sukoon, but this time there is a dhamma before it, then again the ra is heavy. We say tubasirun, tubasirun, not run, run, nice and heavy. Ursil, ur, ursil. We make the ra heavy. We do not say ur, ursil. We say ursil. The ra is heavy. And the same applies if we are stopping on this word and we are reciting the ra with a sukoon. We check the letter before it. If that also has a sukoon, we go to the letter before that one. And if that has a dhamma, then again the ra is heavy. So it's exactly the same as the first three, but instead of talking about fatha, we're talking about the dhamma. So here we say hussar, hussar. The ra is heavy in the case of stopping. So these three are very similar to the first three, except the haraka is different. We're talking about dhamma this time. And then we have an odd one again. And this one again is the one that you have to remember. So the first three and number 5, 6, and 7 here are quite easy to remember. Number 4 from the previous page, when the ra has a hamzatul wasl before it, that's one where you have to make a little bit more effort to remember that one. And also this one, number 8, is also one that you have to pay special attention to. So this is sometimes what you'll find is you have the letter ra, like in this word. You have the letter ra, it will have a sukoon. You check the letter before it, it doesn't have a fatha, which means you'd think it's not heavy. It doesn't even have a dhamma before it. So again, the case for heaviness isn't there. It actually has a kasra. And normally, if it has a kasra before it, you would make it light. So here you would think, okay, the ra needs to be light, but you do need to do one check before. And that one check is check the letter after. If the letter after the ra is an isti'ala letter, now somebody remind me, which letters are the isti'la letters? What's the phrase? How do we know them? What are the letters of isti'la?
Lynn Umar,
A
not
good,
that.
yeah, it's a good
Good,
good guess.
good.
Lin Umar is the tawassut letters, the ones in between, not too long, not too short.
خص تغضب.
Good. It's the hussa daghdin qidh. Hussa daghdin qidh is the 7 letters of that phrase. Hussa daghdin qidh. Those are your heavy letters. So if you have any of those letters after the ra, and as long as they do not have a kasra, then the ra will be heavy. It's almost like you almost see it as what's happening is after the ra, there's such a heavy letter, right? That it protects the ra from the effect of the kasra before it. So the kasra here is trying to make the ra light, but the ta, the letter after, is so heavy and so strong, it's almost like a big bully and taking over the effects of the kasra. So the kasra wants to make the ra light, but the ta, the letter after, which is heavy and strong, that's preventing the effect of the kasra and saying, no, 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 this rock is not going to be light. It's with me and it's going to be heavy. Okay. So in all of these cases, and it's only in these 5 words. Okay. So you don't see it in any other case in the Quran. It's only these 5 words in these 5 cases that you will see this happening. Okay. If the kaf was light, so if you had a kaf, um, do you mean the letter before it, Sister Rubina? So instead of a qaf, if it was a kaf, okay, you type, inshallah, I'll come back to your question in a minute. Okay, so in all of these cases, you can see that there is a ra, it has a kasra before it, and a heavy letter, letter of isti'la, which doesn't have a kasra. You have a ra with a kasra before it, and a letter, heavy letter after it that doesn't have a kasra. You have a ra with a sakin, kasra before it, heavy letter after, that is not with a kasra. Even in the first one, you have the ra with a sukoon. You have a kasra before it, and you have a heavy letter after that, which doesn't have a kasra. If it was a light letter before, would we still make heavy with okay. So I think I've understood now your question. I think your question is if the ra has a light letter before it. Well, yes, even if the ra has a light letter before it, then yes, it would still be because we can see those cases here. So for example, in in this example, mirsad, the meme is a light letter, but we still say mirror. In firqa, the fa is also a light letter. So and the ra is still heavy. We say firqa. We don't say fil. We say firqa. Okay, so the ra is heavy. So it doesn't matter what the letter is before the ra. If it has a kasra, the ra is usually light. However, if after the ra you also have this musta'li or the letter with isti'la, the heavy letter that does not have a kasra, then the ra is always heavy. So the nice thing about this group, actually, one is that it's only these 5 words that you need to remember. It's not like you need to check every time you see a ra with a kasra in the mushaf. Oh, I need to check every time and see if the ra is heavy or light. It actually is only these 5 words. So if you've memorized these, as soon as you read them, you'll know, this rings a bell. There's something going on here. And hopefully you'll remember that the ra is heavy in these cases. So it's only these 5 cases, alhamdulillah. Okay. Those were the 8 cases of when the ra is light. What about the cases of when the ra is, sorry, those were the 8 cases of when the ra was heavy. Forgive me. Now, the 4 cases when the ra is light. This one is a bit easier because there's only 4 of them. And the first 3 are exactly the same as 1, 2, 3, and 5, 6, and 7 from the previous one. In other words, they're the same as 1, 2, and 3 when the ra was light. But in this case, sorry, when the ra was heavy. But in this case, we're talking about kasra, the haraka has changed. And this time, we're not talking about a heavy ra, we're talking about a light ra. I hope that's kind of makes sense because I kind of lost my way a bit there and had to repeat myself. Okay, one is when the ra has a kasra. So when you have a word like this one, where you say to read, we don't say to read, we say to read, to read. Or when the ra has a sukoon with a kasra before it, like in the word fir'aun. We do not say fir, we say fir'aun. Remember the ain is not a heavy letter. It's not in hussa daghdin qil. Ain is a light letter. So we don't need to check that. So in this case, the ra is light. Fir'aun. And then also if we are stopping on the word sihr, the ra has a sukoon. We check the letter before it. It also has a sukoon. We check the letter before that. It has a kasra. So this time we're talking about kasra, kasra, kasra for these first 3. If there is a kasra on the ra, or the ra has a sukoon with a kasra before it, or the ra has a sukoon with a sukoon before it, and the letter before that one has a kasra, in all those cases the ra is light. So here we'll say in this last in number 3, we'll say sihr, sihr. We'll say sihr, not sihr. Ra is heavy, so it's not heavy in this case. It's light. Sihr. And then we have another special case. So the fourth one is always special. So the fourth one is slightly different. With the fourth one, if the ra has a ya before it, and it's a ya lean, or what we say ya layniya. The ya layniya is where you have the ya with a sukoon, with a fatha before it, an a sound. Okay, a, like in the word bait or ghayr. Ghayr is a better example because it also has a ra. خير. In this case, you will make the ra light if you're stopping. You will say خير. You will not say خير. The ra is heavy. It's not supposed to be. If I wasn't stopping on this word and I was saying the run, if I was saying خير for example, خير وأبقى, if I was continuing, well, then in that case, I am reciting the dhamma. If I'm reciting the dhamma, then the ra is heavy. I would say خير خير وأبقى خير وأبقى. However, if I'm stopping خير, well, now I'm pronouncing the ra with a sukoon. So in that case, okay, we come back to the question of if the ra has a sukoon, check the letter before. In this case, the ya also has a sukoon, check the letter before. It has a fatha. However, the minute you see that there is a ya layniya, that this ya is the ya sukoon with a fatha before it, then you know, this is the time where we don't make it heavy, we make it light in the case of stopping. I hope that is clear. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Right. Then we come to, I think there is a question. Okay, no, alhamdulillah. Good. Okay. Right, let's move on. So the two cases of when the ra can be heavy or light. So these are occasions where you have the ra, but you can choose. You can actually pronounce it heavy or light. It's up to you. And it's specific words, specific cases. So the first word we're going to discuss is this word, firqin kattawd. And it's the word firq. You can see you have the ra here. Okay. Now, if we are reciting this word, continuing. So in other words, I'm going to read the second word with it. In other words, I say firqin kattawd. Well, in this case now, let's have a look at the ra. If you see, let's do our original checks that we need to do. The ra has a sukoon. Normally, if the ra has a sukoon, we check the letter before. If we check the letter before, it has a kasra. So we say, okay. In that case, it seems as though it can be light. But let's check the letter after. Now, the letter after is an isti'la letter. It's part of khussa daghdin qil. It's a heavy letter. So you'd think, okay, it's a heavy letter. But the five that we learnt before, where the heavy letter is after, that heavy letter after does not have a kasra. Here it does. So now what you find is actually you're kind of floating in the middle because you're fulfilling some of the conditions for it to be heavy, but not then all of the conditions haven't been met. You're almost there. You're like borderline. So you've got a ra, it's got the kasra before it, it has got a heavy letter after it. The only thing is that heavy letter has a kasra, okay, or in this case, kasratain. He has a kasra. So we're almost there. So for that reason, you can make the ra heavy or light. You can either say fir فرق كالطود, or you can make it heavy and say فرق كالطود. That's the other way you can say it. So you can choose here. Okay. This is in the case of continuing only. Only if you read both words together, then you can choose. In the case of stopping, if you stop on this word and say فرق, firqa. Supposing I run out of breath, I want to stop on this word. Okay. If you stop on this word, now you are reciting the qaf with a sukoon. For those of you that have studied the levels of heaviness before, you know that heavy letters have levels. Sometimes they are more heavy, sometimes they are less heavy. That when they have a fatha, they're generally considered more heavy. When they have a kasra, they're the lowest level of heaviness. So that's why, for example, the qaf here, when in continuation, when we recite it with a kasra, it's the lowest level of heaviness. But when we recite it with a sukoon, it's moved up a level. Okay, it's moved up a level of heaviness. This is if you're following the opinion of Imam Ibn al-Jazari. If you're following his opinion, then once you say firqa and you pronounce the qaf with a sukoon, you've gone up a level of heaviness, which means now the qaf is a stronger heaviness. It's a stronger level. It's moved up, so it's become a bit stronger. What does that mean? It's strong enough to protect the ra from the effects of the kasra before. So the kasra that's on this fa is trying to make the ra light. But now when you stop and you say firq, the qaf is now a stronger level of heaviness. It can protect the effect of that kasra trying to make the ra light. It's going to say, no, 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 no. This ra is with me. It's going to be heavy. I'm heavy. It's going to be heavy with me. Okay. So in the case of stopping, we only have one option. In stopping, only one option, and that's to make the ra heavy. We say firqa. We do not say firqa. Then that would be incorrect. Okay, so you want to make it heavy, you say firqa. You make it heavy. Okay, I hope that's clear. That's not the only one, by the way, that we are discussing. So there is another two. Is that okay for everyone? hope so. Okay, let's discuss the next two. The next two kind of have a similar kind of pattern, so we're going to discuss them both together. And that is the word Misra, referring to the land of Egypt, and we have the word al-qitar, which refers to molten copper, I think. Al-qitar. So with both of these, now you know the word that we just did, firqin qattawd. In continuing, there's two options. With these words, Misra and al-qitari, in continuing, you don't have the two options. In continuing, you read whatever you see. So Misra has a fatha on the ra, we'll pronounce it heavy. We'll say Misra. If we're saying al-qitari, then the ra has a kasra, we pronounce it light. So in continuation, there's no options. You just read it as you see it. You follow the standard rule. You see it with a fatha, recite it heavy. You see it with a kasra, recite it light. So continuing is following the normal rules. The option of pronouncing it heavy or light, we have that option when we are going to stop. So the first example that we saw, firqin qattawd, in stopping, there was only one option. But with these two words, in stopping is where you have the option where you can pronounce it heavy or light. Okay. So why? Okay. So the first one is with Misra and Qitri, actually both of them. If you are stopping on them and reciting them with a sukoon, so you're going to say Misr or you're going to say Qitr. If you pronounce them both with a sukoon, then the letter before them is a very strong letter. It's not just a heavy letter, it's an itbaq letter. Okay, we're going to discuss itbaq in a minute. But it's not just a regular isti'la letter, it's even heavier than that. So these letters are very heavy, and so they block, again, normally our standard rule is if the ra has a sukoon, check the letter before. If that has a sukoon, check the letter before. In both of these cases, when you check the letters before, there is a kasra. And generally, if there's a kasra, we'd pronounce it light. So it's the kasra on the meme here, which is trying to make the ra light, and it's the kasra here on the qaf, which is trying to make the ra light. Now, the thing is, in between, you've got these massively strong letters. You've got the sad in Misr, you've got the ta in Qitr. These letters are so heavy and so strong that they block the effect of the kasra. The kasra can't quite reach because it has to get through these strong, heavy letters first. Therefore, the kasra's effect does not apply, and the ras are heavy. So so in stopping you can. That's the reason why you have the option of reading it heavy. You can say Misr, al-Qitr, right? You can pronounce the ra heavy. So that's your one option. For that reason, you can say, okay, this is going to be a heavy ra. Your second option of why you can read it light is if you just follow the standard rule, what I just said. So if you're pronouncing the ra with a sukoon and you check the letter before and it has a sukoon and you check the letter before and it has a kasra, don't worry about the sad. Just let the kasra apply. Okay, and therefore it's going to be light. So that's why you have two options here. You can follow the normal rules, in which case it has a kasra before it and you can make the ra light, or you can take into the consideration the very heavy letter sandwiched between them and say, okay, that's going to block the effect of the kasra and the ra is going to be heavy instead. Okay, so in stopping you have both options. You can pronounce it heavy or light. Imam Ibn al-Jazari does have a preference. He says that you can pronounce it heavy or light, but he does have a preference on which one it is. So he says, follow the rule of continuing. So he says, Misra, in continuing, the ra is heavy because of the fatha. So if you stop, yes, you have both options. If you're stopping, you have both options. You can say it heavy or light, but he prefers making it heavy because originally the ra has a fatha. So he says, you know what? Because it has a fatha, lean towards that, recite it heavy. It's just his preferred option. Okay. And for Qitri, he goes back again and he looks and says, well, the ra originally has a kasra, even though I'm pronouncing it with a sukoon when I stop and I say al-Qitr, because the ra originally had a kasra, he leans more towards that and says, okay, the preference in this case, if you're stopping, is to recite it light, okay, because of the kasra. However, it doesn't mean he's saying you should pronounce it light. He's saying that's the preferred option. He preferred to do it that way. It doesn't mean that he thinks you're wrong, or if there was a student that came to him and read it heavy, he's not going to say to them, oh, sorry, that you're reading it wrong. I like it light, so only do it light. No, the option is still there. Okay, you can still pronounce them heavy or light in the case of stopping. I hope that is clear. You've written istibaq. I'm not sure, Sister Sumaya. Istibaq, maybe you've spelled it wrong. I'm not sure. Oh, I think you're saying the word, yeah, because we haven't covered it yet. It's itbaq. Itbaq is coming, inshallah. We're going to discuss that one, inshallah. Okay, it's itbaq. Right, okay. So is it just these two words or are there more? These are the only words, Firq inqitad, Misr and Qatar are the only words that are mentioned, I think by Imam Ibn al-Jazari, and they are definitely the only ones mentioned by Dr. Ayman. Okay, so Dr. Ayman Swaid only mentions these. There are a few others that are added by other scholars. So you may have, for example, if you're stopping on if you're stopping on in Surah Al-Layl, وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ وَالشَّفْعِ وَالْوَتْرِ وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسَّرَ. Yasar is another one that comes up as sometimes heavy and sometimes light. There are options with that one as well. I've stuck to Dr. Ayman's here. Also, because this is a 5-week intensive, I didn't want to add two others. I thought there was enough detail as is. Some teachers will add a couple more. There are a couple more words that can be added, but these are the ones by Dr. Ayman. Okay, so there are others. Good question. Okay, moving on. I hope that's okay. If you do think of another question, please do make a note of it. We can discuss it at the end, inshallah. Okay, now we have a word. We have written here a special word. There is only one word in the Mus'haf which has this particular special rule applied to it, and it's a rule of what we call imala. Al-imala. Al-imala means tilting. Okay, when something tilts or leans, or leans is probably a better word, not bends. When something leans towards something, there are actually it's only in the word majriha. We have this ra. Now this ra, you'll notice in your mushaf will be it'll be denoted by this diamond. Sometimes the diamond is like colored in black, sometimes it's left hollow, but normally there's some kind of sign that you'll have. So if you check your mushaf, you will see it for this particular word. Now, normally what we know in our general recitation is we have sorry, I'm going backwards instead of forwards. We have the fatha, which is straight up, right? Right? You have this fatha straight up sound. The opposite of the fatha is the kasra. E. They're like two opposites, right? Is straight up. E is kind of a downwards kind of, and it's a haraka at the bottom. So and E are kind of like opposites. Then we have something called the imala. The imala is a sound which is in between these, right? And it's actually closer to the kasra sound. Okay, so it's about here, right? So it's not in the middle directly, it's closer to the kasra sound. It's a sound. Majriha, majriha. So one, you'll notice the ra is pronounced light. It's not reha, it's reha. The ra is light because it's closer to the kasra sound, so it's more towards the light ra anyway. So we pronounce the ra light. But this is the only word where you say majri. Okay, so this is why tajweed is so important to be learned by a teacher. It's not something you can learn on your own because you'd need to practice reciting this in the correct way, and a teacher would have to also check it and make sure that you are saying it correctly. So this is what we call imala. There is another one, I haven't included it here. There is something else as well. They do have an imala which is closer to the fatha, but that's not required, that's not used at all in our recitation of Hafs and Asim. It is used in other recitations. So we're not going to be discussing that one here. But majriha, as I said, it's only one word for Hafs and Asim, which is here. Other recitations have a lot more. So sometimes you may hear someone reciting in a different way, in a different recitation, and they have a lot of A sounds, right? Dunye, wadduhi. This is because they are following a different recitation, and that recitation may have a lot more imalas in there. Hafs and Asim only does it for this one word. Okay. Okay, here's some questions for you, so get ready to type. I would like you, please, to have your chat box open, and I will ask you to type the answers, please. So please be ready for that. Okay, so your first question is, in question A, we have the word here. I'm not going to say the word because otherwise I'll give it away. In the first, in A, we have that word with the ra. Could you please tell me in continuing, so this is how you're going to write your answer. Continuing, is it light or heavy? In stopping, is it light or heavy? So all you need to write is C, continuing equals, if it's light, do an L, if it's heavy, do a H. And then write S equals, S is in stopping, L for light, H for heavy, just to make it easier for you, inshallah. So for A, I would like you to give me the answer. In continuing and stopping on this word, how is the ra pronounced? Is it light or is it heavy? Good. Excellent. Yes, it is heavy for both. Good. Yes, so it doesn't matter if you're stopping on the word and saying yaro and just stopping, or if you're going on and reading the next word, both are heavy. Now try B. What about B? Well done, mashallah. So B, tell me about this one now. Continuing and stopping. Is the ra going to be heavy or light? Is the ra going to be heavy or light? Okay, we seem to have a mixture of answers coming through. Okay, good. Yes, most of you seem to have it right. Good. Remember, this time the ra has a kasra. If we say lidhikri and then we're going to carry on reading, then the ra is light because it has a kasra. In the case of stopping, we will check the because it has a sukoon, we'll say lidhikr. We'll have the ra, we check the letter before it has a sukoon, check the letter before it has a kasra. So kasra is usually used for when the letter is light. So light for both. Now try C. What about C? Heavy or light? Okay. Oh, so we got a proper mixture of answers again. Okay, so some people saying both heavy, some people saying both light. Make sure you're checking carefully. You do have to be careful of this one. They're not both the same. They're not both the same. Some of you, okay, then let's have a look. So, yes, in continuing, yes, when we say khayrun, the ra is heavy. However, when we are stopping, then we are pronouncing it with a sukoon. If it has a sukoon, you check the letter before it has a sukoon. But this letter with a sukoon is a ya. Is it ya lean? Yes, it has a fatha before it. So yes, if it's a ya lean, it's going to be light. So it's actually continuing heavy, stopping is light. Well done, Sister Mufida. Well done, Sister Razina, mashallah. Some of you got it right, mashallah. Well done. Okay, now try D. Nuzur, actually, for those of you that were asking about the question about words where there are, you have options. Nuzur without the al at the beginning is also one of them. Okay, we seem this one, everyone seems to be the same. Most of you seem to be, some of you are changing. Well, it has a dhamma. If we are continuing and we recite the dhamma, we say ru, so it's heavy. In stopping, we add a sukoon, so we check the letter before, it has a dhamma, so it's still heavy. Actually, this one is heavy for both. Okay, now try E. Well done to those of you that got it right, Sister Razina, Sister Radia, good. Sister Aisha, well done. Okay. Good. Very good. Okay, well done, Sister Sumaya, Sister Mahareen, Sister Lamisa. Good. Okay, they are not both the same actually. So yes, they are different. So in continuing, it has a kasra, so it's light. If we're stopping, we add a sukoon. We check the letter before. It's a dhamma, and dhamma is for heavy. So this one is continuing, it's light. Stopping is heavy. Try the next one, F. What's F? Okay. Okay, let's have a look. It's heavy. It's heavy for both. Yes, good. MashaAllah. Most of you got that one right. Good. Okay, try G. Remember, firqa, sorry, is heavy. Let me just explain quickly. Is heavy because the ra has a sukoon. So we checked the letter before. It has a kasra. However, the letter after is a strong letter. It's a isti'la, and it doesn't have a kasra. So it's one of those that the ra is heavy. Like, you remember the 5 words that I mentioned? Firqa was one of them. Okay, then G. Mm, okay. Okay, with G, yes, both are. It's not heavy or light. We don't actually have the option. It's light for both. Okay, because remember, it's already got a sukoon. So if I stop on it, I'm going to read the sukoon which is already there. And if I stop, I'm still going to read it with sukoon, in which case I will check the letter before, and the letter before it has a kasra. So in both cases, it's got a kasra before it. We're going to make it light. And finally, the last one, H. Think carefully. Oh, everyone's doing well, mashallah. Excellent. Good. Good reason, mashallah. Yes, good. Alhamdulillah. Well done. With this one, remember we said that if there is a Hamzatul Wasl before the Ra, then the Ra is heavy. So in this case, it will be heavy, whether you are continuing, whether you're joining with the previous word, or whether you're starting with this word, it will be recited heavy. Well done, everybody, mashallah. Excellent. Good. Alhamdulillah. Let's continue. Okay. Now for itbaq and infitah. With itbaq and infitah, we say itbaq literally means adhesion. Okay, why is it called adhesion? Because I'll explain actually in a minute. So just hang on a sec. So itbaq means adhesion. Its opposite is infitah. Infitah comes from word fataha, which means to open. Okay, it's where something is just open and sound can flow very easily through it, right? With itbaq, it's not going to flow so easily. So what is itbaq? Itbaq is the compression or the trapping of the sound of a letter between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Normally what happens with the letter of itbaq is if this is the roof of the mouth, your tongue will come and it'll align itself close so that the sound kind of bounces around in that space. So normally if the actually let me do it on this because it'd be easier to see. So on here, the tongue will come and instead of the tongue being flat down like it normally is, the tongue will be raised and it'll be close to the roof of the mouth. It won't be touching the roof of the mouth, but there will be this space, this small space in between my hand and the roof of the mouth, and the sound kind of gets trapped there and it starts to make this kind of it bounces around and it makes like an echoey type of noise or an echoey type of sound, and it makes the heavy sound even more heavy. So if you've got a heavy letter and it's got itbaq, it's going to be even heavier than if it only had itbaq. I will go into detail about this in a minute. There's only 4 letters that have itbaq: sad, sa, ba, ba, va. See how heavy they sound? So it's the sad, the dad, ta, and the va. These are your heavy letters. When you pronounce them saw, you'll notice that the tongue should stay closer closer to the roof of the mouth. I've also written here, all the letters of itbaq have isti'la. All of these, sad, dad, ta, and va, all of these are in hussa daghtin qidh. But not all of the letters in khussa daghtin qidh, not all of those heavy letters have itbaq, right? Kha is not here. What I mean is the heavy letters are, we said, khussa daghtin qidh. right? So Sad is here. So Sad is here. Sad we can cross off. Dad is here. Dad we can cross off. Ta is here. We can cross that off too. And Dha is here. So Dha we can cross off. We've got the Ha and the Ghain and the Qaf are letters that are heavy. They have isti'la, but they're not in this category. They don't have itbaq. Okay. So all of these letters here have isti'la, but all of these letters do not have itbaq. Okay. That's what I'm saying. I hope that's clear. So letters that have both, so here the Sad, the Dad, the Ta, and the Dha, these letters, these four that are on the screen, are the heaviest letters. They are heavier than Ha. They are heavier than Qaf. They are heavier than the Ghain. Okay. With infitah, this means that you haven't got that compression. You haven't got, in other words, that trapping of the sound. In other words, the tongue, with infitah letters, the tongue doesn't stay close to the roof of the mouth. In fact, it comes down so that the sound can freely flow. Okay, so this is like your normal light letters, and it's all the remaining letters other than Sad, Dad, Ta, and Dha. Yes, Sister Khadija. You
Assalamu
just need to.
alaikum. Sis-
Walaikum
sis-
salam, Salam.
Sorry, it's a question about the. I was trying to look for the hand. I couldn't find it for this time.
Oh, that's
Subhanallah.
okay.
It's a question of the last letter we did the H
Sorry,
and
which one?
the last letter on the heaviness of the Ras. The last
Okay.
question H.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, when you're reading a letter, when there's Hamzat Wasl, normally they say we take the haraka of the third letter. So in this
Mm-hmm.
case, was a fatha. So was that what contributed to the ra being heavy? Because that's what I
Oh,
thought.
okay.
Because
Okay,
yeah,
good.
because I was thinking if there's a kasra, are they what would happen to the ra? Sure.
Okay. So when we have that rule of looking at the third letter, it's typically with the verbs. Okay. And yes, this is a verb, and you would look at the third letter. So far your understanding is correct. Yes, you would look at the third letter. So this is letter number one, this is letter number two, this is letter number three.
Mhm.
If the third letter has a fatha, it doesn't mean you put the same haraka at the front. Actually, the rule is if it has a fatha or a kasra, for both of them, you would add a kasra at the beginning. Okay, for both of them. So here we wouldn't actually say arukab, we would say irukab if we're starting, right?
Yeah.
Only if the third letter has a dhamma, then we will add
Mhm.
a dhamma. Like the word, like this one. Let me just write it down for you.
No,
We
I
have
remember
this.
that rule now. Yes, I remember that rule.
You remember?
Subhanallah. Yes,
Like
yes.
uktub, yeah, uktub. So actually, it's not to do with that. It's to do with the fact that, okay, you will add a kasra, but this kasra is not an original kasra. You're adding it yourself, right,
Mhm.
for the ease of recitation because you need to join the ra. So because this kasra is not original, it's being added and put there when we recite, therefore the ra is heavy. And so remember the cheat method was if there is a hamzatul wasl right next to the ra, then
Yeah.
the ra will be heavy. So as long
Yes.
as you can, even if you just remember that you see the hamzatul wasal, if there's a ra sakina after it, make the ra
Mm.
heavy. All
Okay.
right?
Jazakumullah khair.
Barakallah feek. Okay. Okay, so this is a very interesting few diagrams. This is now comparing what's actually going on with when you have a light letter and then you have a heavy letter and then you have like a super heavy letter, right? So the first one I'm going to show you is we're going to look at infitah and istifal. So istifal is where you lower you do not have elevation of the sound in the mouth, it's lowered. Infitah is where you do not have the trapping. So this is the really light letters, the proper light letters like kaf, ta, ba, ma, la, all of these. Is isti'ala itbaq responsible for heaviness of the letter? It's actually isti'ala. Isti'ala is the main one, Sister Mahdeen. Isti'ala is the main one where we say that the letter is heavy. Itbaq, we say adds what we call it's almost like I mean in basic English you could say it supercharges the heaviness, but the itbaq adds like a echoey, hollowy added sound to the itbaq. I'll show you this now, inshallah, and I'll demonstrate it for you, and hopefully you'll be able to tell the difference. Let me just explain this first, inshallah. So you have infita versus istifal. Okay, so for this, you haven't got the tongue. Now let me just change the color of my pen because I've noticed it's sometimes red and that can be annoying because it doesn't. Okay. So with the itbaq, we said that the tongue stays close. It would have been like this if it's going to stay close and you get the trapping. But in this one, you're not getting the trapping, so you don't get that. Okay. So you'll notice that actually for the kaf, the tongue comes up. For the k, 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 and then we say ka, the tongue will come down and then the tongue will just be flat. Okay. So the sound literally just comes straight out. Ka, 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 ka. It's nice and light. When you have a just change back to here. When we have now isti'la, so this is the heavy, the one I said where this makes your letters heavy. Okay, just what the Sister Mehreen was asking. When you have a letter that has isti'la, so it's heavy, but there's no trapping. Okay, it's just a basic level of heaviness. Okay, so this is not sad, dad, ta, and dha. This is words like qaf, ghain, kha, those three that I circled previously. For this one now, the sound is elevated. So when I say this is for the letter qaf, so for the qaf, the makhraj is the back. So initially the tongue will go up to touch the soft palate. And then when I drop this, when the tongue comes down to say qa, qa, when I move away, the tongue will be about here. Oh, let me just change the color. I don't think no, it hasn't changed yet. Hang on. And then the tongue will come about here. Okay, but the sound is, look, directed. Remember I was mentioning diagonally. It's like going behind your upper two incisors. The direction of the sound is diagonally upwards in front of you, right? So this would be the sound. So for example, listen carefully. Ba, ba, ra. It's heavy, right? It sounds heavy. But when you hear the next one with itbaq, you'll notice inshallah a difference. So the qaf is, yes, you haven't got the trapping, but there's an elevation, there's a heaviness to this sound. Then we come to letters that have isti'la, they're heavy, but now you got itbaq as well. Now you got the trapping, the hollowy, the echoey sound on top. So this is your supercharged one, right? How do we make sure we do this? Well, in this one, this is an example of this would be the letter la. So you'll notice with the letter la now, you can see how the tongue, first of all, is in line with the upper palate. So now you've got this space here, okay? And the sound isn't now moved. Let me just get rid of that because just to make it easier to see. So now the sound isn't just going diagonally upwards in front of you. It's moving now in a vertical fashion straight up. So this is when I was saying to people, for example, even in the practice sessions, I've been saying about directing the sound vertically up towards the middle of the upper palate. This time you're trying to keep the sound inside the mouth and just making it go straight up towards the roof of the mouth. So this is like saying law, law, saw. Can you hear that like echoey type sound? I'm going to say the qaf and then I'm going to say the law. And I want you to hear the difference in the heaviness. They're both heavy, but there will be a slight difference. One will sound more echoey, hollowy, which should be the law. Okay. Qa, 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 law, law, law. Can you see how the law is sounding more restricted and it's sounding like it's in the mouth? It's like kept in the mouth. Whereas the qaf sounds as though it's more, I don't want to say clear, but the sound seems to be coming out more at more ease than it was with the law. I'll say it again. Listen again. Qa, 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 law, law, law. Another example would be, for example, if we did the kha and we did the sad. Okay, so the kha is the one which is not as heavy. The sad is the supercharged one. Kha, 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 fa, fa, sa. I hope you can hear the difference, right? So the kha is kha, diagonally up. The sound is being sent diagonally up. Kha, kha. When I say the sad, I'm trying to keep the sound in my mouth. I'm not even opening my mouth as much. If you notice the kha, if you notice when I say kha, I open my lips separate quite a bit. Kha, kha, kha. But when I say sad, my lips are even less open. Sa, 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 ha, ha, ha. Why? Because I open it less for the sad and the va. The itbaq letters I open the mouth less because it's easier than to trap the sound in the mouth. Okay, it helps with that effect. I hope that's clear, Sister Mehreen. I hope that's also clarified it for you, the question that you had, inshallah. Okay, right. Good. Okay, alhamdulillah. Right, let's move on. So if the Larkin is smart, I'm only going to touch on this because of time. Also because it's easy. We don't need to worry about this so much. If the Larkin is smart are to do with the Arabic language, it doesn't really affect your tajweed. It doesn't affect the way you recite. Sister Mehreen.
Can I speak instead?
Yes,
It
of course.
took quite long to type the
Yeah,
message.
that's fine.
So if I give the letter, the heavy letter, istiyala, but not itbaq, will that make it a lighter letter? Or will
We don't say it's a lighter letter, but I see what in relation to the itbaq, yes, it won't sound as heavy.
it won't sound as heavy? So if I do not give the letter istiyala, and if I give it itbaq, it changes to a light letter because of the raising of the back edge of the tongue.
If you have, so hang on, so say that again. So you're saying if you have a letter which is not isti'la, but it has itbaq. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're discussing the itbaq letters.
Okay.
Sod, dot, dha. So I'm looking at those letters alone. If I happen to give it istiala, but if I do not give it itbaq, does it change to a muraqqaq letter?
Yes,
Or
it
if I
will.
give it istiala, if I give it itbaq and I do not give it istiala, will that change into a muraqqaq letter?
Okay, I get your question. Yes, jazakallah khairan. Okay.
Thank you.
So when you have an itbaq letter, if you do not give it itbaq, we won't say it will become muraqqaq. Okay. What we will say is it will start to sound, now if I bring those diagrams back, if you don't do itbaq, you're left with only isti'la. You're going to pronounce it like these letters here. So it'll start to sound like qa. So in other words, the way I say qa, ha, gha, and then if I'm saying the sad, da, ta, da wrong, I'll say them the same. They'll match. And this is wrong, so I'll say it. Qa, sa, ha, va. See, va is heavy, but it's not va. Va is the correct way. So if you don't do the itbaq, you can pronounce sad, da, ta, and va without the itbaq, but that would be wrong. And you would make it like the qaf, the ghain, and the ha. So it'll still be heavy. If you pronounce the, and actually, if you have an itbaq letter, you can't really pronounce them with the itbaq only. So if I have, for example, sad, dad, ta, and dha, I can pronounce them with isti'la and not itbaq, but I can't do it the other way. I can't have itbaq and not do the isti'la, because when you do itbaq, the tongue is elevated. The sound is already elevated in the mouth. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to do itbaq here without the isti'la, because when you do itbaq, you have raised the voice anyway, if that makes sense. Is that okay for you?
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Okay.
That jazakallah
Okay.
khair.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallah fi, no problem. Okay, so this one is all to do with Arabic letters and the Arabic language. So I'm just going to kind of skip over it because of time. This category does not change your recitation in any way. Okay, it's there for Arabic grammar because in the past, Arabic grammar and tajweed used to be taught together. So some of the things of Arabic grammar have stayed, and this is one of them. This is part of Arabic grammar, and it's been kept because it was always kept together. So this part of Arabic grammar has always stayed in the Sifaat. So we're going to skip over this, inshallah, because I don't think it's not, because we're focusing on the tajweed, we don't really need it. Okay, what about when you want to list the qualities now? What if I said to you, I have this letter and I want you to list all of the Sifaat. Tell me all of the Sifaat. In your mind, you're going to go through this process. You're first going to say, is this letter فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتْ? Is it in this phrase? If it is, then it's a letter of hams. If it's not, then it's a letter of jahr. So that's your first thing you're going to do. Is it hams or jahar? And you know that because if it's فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ sakat, if it's in this phrase, if it's one of these letters, it is hams. Okay. The next one is it ajidu qatin bakat? Is it found in this phrase of ajidu qatin bakat? If it is, then it's shidda. If it's not, then you have to ask the next question, which is it part of lin umar? If it's part of lin umar, then that means it's tawassut. And if it's not, then it's rakhawa. So from the first question, you're determining whether it's hams or jahar. From question 2 and 3, you're finding out is it shidda, tawassut, or rakhawa, the one with the 3. Okay. The next question is it part of husadat qil? Okay, if it's in this phrase, then it is a letter of isti'la. If it's not, then it's a letter of istifal. Sorry, there is a slight typo there. And the fifth question is it part of sad, da, ta, dha? If it is, then it's itbaq. If it's no, then it's infitah. And the final question, which is related to the grammar, is the letter part of farmanlub? If it's part of farmanlub, then it's a letter of idlaq. If not, then it's a letter of ismat. So this is like in your mind, if you can keep this flow, it will ensure that you mention and you can list all of the sifat of a letter, all the sifat with opposites. Okay. The other way you could look at it is there is another diagram. You could look at it like this. Is it part of, so it's very similar to what I just did. فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ sakat. If it's yes, it has hams. If no, it has jahar. The next question, is it part of ajidu qatin bakat? If it's yes, then it's shidda. If it's no, then is it part of lin umar? Yeah, if it's yes, then it's tawassut. If it's not, then it's rakhawa. The next question, husadaq qil. If it is, then it's isti'la. If it's no, then it's istifal. And then sada, tada, if it's yes, it's itbaq. So I've just given you two different diagrams. Inshallah, you can go with whichever one works best for you. Unless you have your other, if you already have an established way that works, stick with that, inshallah. Okay. Okay. Now the sifat without opposites. Now, the sifat with opposites, the ones that we just did, you can list them for every single letter. Every single letter will have a minimum of 5 because those are the 5 that we just did. Okay. Right. These are the 5 that we just did. So it's either going to be number 1 here, hams or jahar, shiddat wa rakhawa, isti'la or istifal, itbaq or infitah, or idlaq or ismat. One of those 5, for every letter you will have 5 minimum. Now, there are some letters that will have some extras. So these are the ones we're going to mention now. These are the sifat which do not have opposites. Either a letter has it or it doesn't. So the first one we're going to discuss is as-safir. As-safir actually refers to, linguistically, it means whistling. It's a whistling sound. So when we whistle, we make a very sharp sound. Now, I'm not going to be able to whistle now because I'm being put on the spot, but my whistling isn't very good. But when we whistle, we make a very narrow space with our lips and the sound goes through and makes a piercing sound. I can't do it now. You make that sound, right? So with Safir, this is where you have a sharpness in the sound, okay? And it's because the sound is going through a tight passage like when we whistle with our lips, okay? So letters like this are seen, za, and sad. When we say s, that sound, it's a whistly type sound. As the buzzing sound is also considered one of them. As, even for the sad, is one of those. So sad, za, and sin, these 3 letters have this whistling sound. So for sin, if I asked you to list the sifat, you would say, sin is hams, sin is rakhawa, sin is istifal, sin is infitah, sin is ismat, and then you'd say those are the 5. And then on top of that, you say sin is also as-safir or safir. So that is I think this one's pretty straightforward. It's not too difficult, inshallah. The next one is qalqala. Qalqala is what we call a bounce. Some people call it a vibration. Bounce is a better term because you don't, when you do the qalqala, you don't keep the vibration going. Vibrations are normally like multiple. It's like a shake, right? But the qalqala is more like a bounce. I prefer the word bounce because for example, when you have a ball that bounces off the wall, it bounces the once. It hits the wall and comes back. It doesn't vibrate then keep hitting the wall. You're not doing that. You're not doing multiple. You just do the one bounce. Okay, when you do the qalqala. Now, the qalqala is a movement of the letter within its makharij. Okay, and it is it only applies when the letter has a sukoon. So the letters of qalqala, we put them in a phrase, qutub jad, qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal. any of these letters, when they have a sukoon, like when we say aqsa, aqsa, the sad has the qaf has a sukoon. We say we don't say aqsa, we say aqa. We bounce, so we go to the makhraj, we hit the makhraj, we bounce off it. Aqa. Remember, this is because when you say remember it has shidda and sorry, jahar, right? So the qaf, you stop the sound and you stop the breath. So when you say it's hard to hear it. So remember, this is why you have the qalqala. See, now you know, it's definitely a qaf, she said. Okay. So with all these letters, you bounce them. Aqa, aqa, ab, aj, ad. Okay. So as I said, vibration and echo are words that they use to describe the qalqala. These are not the words that I prefer. I actually prefer the word bounce. I think it sounds it's more accurate. Okay. But with these you bounce them, which means any other letter other than these, if you find it and it has a sukoon, no other letter should be bounced. Lam is not here. And a lot of people will say ala, ala ard, ala, right? They bounce the lam, alla, alla. It shouldn't be alla, it should be al. Hold it, al ard, al ard. Okay, so the lam is not one. Also, noon, people tend to do it with noon. Like when they say, for example, min, they'll say min qabalik. It's not min because noon is not a qalqala letter. It's min. Hold it. Min qabalik. Okay. Those are the common ones that people often bounce when they shouldn't. There are levels of qalqala. So we have, there are two different opinions. Dr. Ayman actually gives them two. He divides them into two. There is another opinion which divides this section into three. We're just going to do the one for today. So there's one called qalqalatul kubra, or the big qalqala. This is when you are stopping on a word and it has a sukoon or a shadda. So for example, if you're stopping on the word ba is on part of qutubujad, it is a qalqala letter. If you stop on qaf, that's also a qalqala letter. If we stop on falaqa, we are stopping with a sukoon. On tab, we have a shadda, but we also stop on it with a sukoon. So when we stop on any of these, whether it has a shadda or a sukoon, doesn't matter. They are both considered qalqalatul kubra. Watab al-falaq. Okay, they are considered the big qalqala or the qalqalatul kubra. The second category is qalqalatul sughra, or what we say the smaller qalqala. This one is when you are pronouncing a letter with qalqala, it has a sukoon, but you're not stopping. You're going to carry on reading. So an example is the dal here. The dal is a letter, it comes in Qutubu Jadd. It's the last letter in Qutubu Jadd, so it's definitely a qalqala letter. But I'm not stopping. I'm not saying yada and stopping. I'm saying yada khuluna. I wouldn't stop on yada anyway, because in this case, this is not the word. The word is yada khuluna. So we say yadkhuluna. So you pronounce the qalqala and you continue. Another example is yaja'al, the jim. Yaja'al. That's your qalqala sughra. It is not so pronounced. It's not like I'm stopping after it. Okay. Another one is if you're at the end of an ayah, but you are not stopping. So supposing you get to an end of an ayah like this, this dal is qutubujad. It's one of the qutubujad letters. So it does have qalqala. But I'm not going to stop. ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So if I'm not stopping and I carry on reading, then this would be qalqalatu sughra. But if I am stopping, like I did on the end of the next part, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. If I stop, then it's qalqalatul kubra because I'm stopping on it. Okay, so qalqalatul kubra is when you're stopping. It doesn't matter if it has a sukoon or a shadda. Qalqalatul sughra, the small one, is as long as you're continuing, after the qalqala, you're reading more letters or more words. You carry on. Okay, if you do that, then it's qalqalatul sughra. Okay, then we come to lean. Lean is described when somebody is lean. It refers to gentleness or softness. Okay, it's only applied to the letter waw and ya when they are layniya. Layniya means when we have the waw or the ya, they both have a sukoon. And the letter before it, doesn't matter what the letter is, it just has a fatha. So you're making a O or a sound. O, a, khawf, bait, this O that you hear, in these cases, the waw and the ya are called lean. this lean means there's a softness to them. There's a gentleness about them. When we say oh, a, compare that to when I say ab, or if I say oh, there's a restrictive sound to the oh. When I say ab, again, there's that sharpness where the sound stops and a bounce. When I say oh, it's just gentle. A, just gentle. Okay, the letters just flow and they're just it sounds soft. So this is the quality of waw and ya when they have a sukoon and a fatha before them only. Okay, then they are considered having this characteristic of lean. Like in the word Khawf, like in the word Al-Bayt, or even the word Quraysh, or we say Liqawm. Again, the waw and the ya are layniya, and they are soft. Then we have the quality of inhiraf. Inhiraf literally means drifting. This is where the sound is going to drift. In other words, the sound is going to move. It's not going, normally, if we just open our mouth and say, ah, the sound comes out in a kind of a straight way, right? It just comes straight out the mouth, straight path. This, with inhiraf, this is where the sound, it can't come out straight. And it can't come out straight from the mouth because the tongue has come in the way. There's some kind of blockage by the tongue. Because of that, the sound has to kind of deviate and find another route. Okay. And what I mean by that is, one, it's only applied to the letter lam and letter ra. For the letter ra, what we say is when the, now this is the back of the tongue and this is the front of the tongue. We say that the sound comes forward. Oh, I need to change the color of my. The sound comes forward, okay, towards the front. But then because the tongue comes up for the makhraj of the ra, we say ar. Now the sound cannot come straight out the mouth because the tongue's come up. Now the sound can only come through a gap between the tip of the tongue, the taraful lisan, and the upper palate. Okay, so there has to be a gap between the tongue and the upper palate, and through that gap, the sound has to flow. Okay, it can't come straight because if this is my tongue and it comes up, the sound is coming like this. The tongue is in the way. It's not going to come out in its straight fashion anymore. It's going to have to deviate, come up, and go through that gap only. Okay, that is what we mean by inhiraf. When we say ar, that's why the sound can carry on. If I just say the sound's not deviating, it's just stopping. Okay, but to say to keep the sound going, that's a deviation because now the sound is it's moving forward and then it's going up the tongue and going through that gap. With the lam, the drifting is different. Okay, so the drifting for both of these letters is not the same. It only occurs in these letters. So the ra I've done. For the lam, now the tongue does press at the top. The front of the tongue, when it touches the top, when we say al, try saying it al. The tongue actually presses at the top, which means there's no gap like there was for the ra. Now what's going to happen is the sound is going to come straight down. Okay, here. And now because there's the blockage here, the sound is going to try and come around the edges of the tongue, which you can see here. Okay, it comes from the side. So actually, when you say L, you don't say L and keep the sound in the mouth. You want to push forward with the sound so that it's moving round the tongue and still coming out. L, not L. It's almost like a itbaq sound because the sound's staying in the mouth. You don't want that. It's L, push forward with the sound and let it come out. Okay, so even though the tongue comes up, keep pushing forward with the tongue, with the voice, sorry. I hope that's clear. That's the inhiraf, the drifting of the sound because of the blockage of the path, and therefore the sound has to flow in a slightly different way. It's drifting or taking a different path. It's deviating. Then we have the tikrar. Let me just get rid of my drawings. The tikrar is what we call the trilling. This is basically the best way to explain this is to actually do it. This noise. This noise is called the trilling, and this is what is tikrar. Tikrar is that noise that I make, okay? So it is the trilling of the tongue when pronouncing ara. This sifat is the only sifat that you have to control, okay? All the other sifat, you have to make sure you do them. When you do the safir, when you're doing the whistling, as, You make sure you do it. Okay. When you do the qalqala, you make sure you do it. With tikrar, you want to control it. You can't let your tongue be let loose. You can't say, for example, mir rabbik, mir rabbik. If you're doing that, then what's happening is the tongue is going to the ra and then it comes away. Because when you say arr, the tongue is literally flapping. Okay. And when it flaps, each time it touches the top and then lets go, you've just pronounced another ra. So you're going ra 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 ra. It's like basically that's what you're doing. You just keep on pronouncing lots of ra's. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to either do none, in which case you would say mirabbik, mirabbik. That's no trilling at all. Or you are only allowed one. Mir, 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 mirabbik, mirabbik, mirabbik. No, that one wasn't one. Mirabbik, that's none. Mirabbik, mirab. You see, mir, mirabbik, mirabbik. That slight one sound that you hear, that's fine. You're not allowed more than that. So this one is all about control. Don't let your tongue loose just so that it runs wild and just keeps flapping. You want to control it. Okay. And this is only applied to the letter Ra. Okay. We also have the quality of tafashi. Tafashi, the way that this one's actually easy to remember, I remember it as sometimes tafashin, because the tafashi is for the sheen, tafashin. I just had this way of when I was younger when I used to remember it. So tafashi is for the letter sheen only. Its actual literal definition is spreading. It is where the breath spreads out in the mouth. When you say ash, the sound or the breath in the mouth is just going in every direction. Okay, it starts at the makharij and it just spreads towards all the teeth. So your teeth kind of come together. They're not pressing hard or anything, but they do come together when you say ash. And then the breath just pushes against all the teeth. It's just spreading in the mouth and going towards the teeth. Okay, so that is the tafashi, that shh sound that you hear for the sheen. Okay. Then we have the istitala. The istitala is only applied to the letter dad. We say that the dad with the istitala is what we say when remember for the dad we explained how the back of the tongue is pressing against the upper molars, right? But we said that the whole of the tongue is against the upper palate, but you have that gap in the middle, right? You have that groove in the middle, right? So what happens is as you say the dad, when you say the sound comes from the back, it moves forward, and then the front of the tongue is up, so the sound now can't come out. And then what happens is, as you keep saying it, when you say the sound is coming forward and it's building up here. And you're getting this pressure build up here. Because of the pressure build up, the tongue is kind of trying to move forward, but you're controlling that, right? This movement, this lengthening of the way that the tongue, the pressure that you feel behind the tip of the tongue, this pushing forward of slightly, very slight pushing of the tongue, the pressure build up, the running of the sound, this is what we call as the istitala. It makes a lengthening sound of the dad. In other words, you hear the dad doesn't just stop and say it's not it's get my microphone a bit closer to make sure you can hear this sound that you hear traveling inside the mouth, that's the istitala. Okay, and this is just something that is applied just to the letter dad. So you can actually see in the diagram here, the arrows are the sound comes up and it's building the pressure up here because this part here is blocking the way. So the sound can't come out, okay? But the sound is pushing, and then as it keeps coming forward, the pressure builds up so much that there comes to a point where you can't carry on, okay? You just have to stop. That's the dad and the istitala. Then we have the ghunna. The ghunna we have already kind of covered. This is the nasalization or the sound going through the nasal cavity. It's only applied to the noon and the meme. So for the noon and the meme, when you list their 5 sifat, you would then add on the ghunna for these. Okay, so this is I think this sort of kind of kind of covered this already. So for both of these letters, a fundamental part of them. Remember we said we have the physical part and you have the nasalization part. So the physical part for the meme is the two lips coming together. For the noon is the tarful lisan hitting the gums behind the upper two teeth. But in addition to those parts, you need the sound to go through the khayshum. When that happens, then you are pronouncing the letters completely. Okay, you need both elements. Okay. So this depicted by the diagrams here. So you can see, for example, the noon tip of the tongue has come up, but the meme is the lips, and then you've got this sound traveling through the khayshum for both. Okay, and finally, very quickly, again, what's your evidence if somebody starts asking you all about these sifat? You mentioned the matnul jazariya. These are the lines from the jazariya which mention the sifat. So we have here sifatuha, the sifat of them, the sifat of the letters. And then he lists the sifat. He says jahar wa likhu, referring to likhawa, mustafil, referring to istifal, munfatih, which is infitah, musmatatun, which is your ismat. So he lists them here. He says some of them. He says jahar, rakhawa, istifal, infitah, ismat, wadidda qul. Here he's saying, and their opposites are. He's about to name their opposites. So jahar and hams go together. So he mentioned jahar here. He mentions hams, its opposite now here. So he says mahmusuha. Mahmusuha has the word hams in it. That's the hams. Mahmusuha, and then he gives the phrase. فحثه شخص سكت. That's your hams. Then the next one he mentioned at the beginning was rakhawa. The opposite of rakhawa is shidda. Now he says shadiduha. The shidda of them is the lafaz that comes in the phrase ajidu qatin bakat. Ajidu qatin bakat is your shidda letters. Then he says وَبَيْنَ رِخْوٍ وَالشَّدِيدِ لِنْعُمَرٍ. وَبَيْنَ, and in between the rikhu, which is rakhawa, in between rakhawa and shidda, وَبَيْنَ رِخْوٍ وَالشَّدِيدِ لِنْعُمَرٍ. So this is the tawassut letters. What's in between the shidda and the rakhawa are the tawassut letters, which are لِنْعُمَرٍ. The lam, the noon, the ain, the mim, and the ra. Then he says وَسَبْعُ عُلْوٍ. Ulwin comes from the word ali, meaning high. Oops, sorry about that. Let me just get rid of that. Don't know what happened. Sorry. So he then mentions the وَسَبْعُ عُلْوٍ. Mustafil is in istifal. The opposite of istifal is referenced here, ulwin. In other words, the isti'la letters. Then he says, خُصَّ ضَغْطٍ قِضْ حَصَرٍ وَسَبْعُ عُلْوٍ خُصَّ ضَغْطٍ قِضْ حَصَرٍ. Those are your isti'la letters. Then he says, وَصَادُ ضَادٌ طَاءُ ضَاءٌ مُطْبَقَةٌ. The sad, the dad, the ta, and the dha are mutbaqah. In other words, they are itbaq, which is the opposite here of infitah. So he mentions all the opposites here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he mentions each of their opposites here. So this is the opposite for that one. This is the opposite of the next one. That one goes with that one. And then this is number 3, isti'la. Now here he's mentioned the opposite of infitah, which is itbaq. Then he says, وَفَرَّ مِنْ لُبِّ الْحُرُوفُ الْمُذْلَقَةِ. The farra min lub is from the letters of idlaq. Mudlaqa is from the idlaq. Okay. Then he goes on. So those are all the 5 main ones done with their opposites. He says, because he mentions what qul with their opposites. Now he's mentioning the ones without opposites. Safiruha, the safir is sad, was sadun, wazayun, sinu, sad, za, and sin. Qalqalatun, qutubu jadin, wallinu. The qalqala is qutubu jad. Now he's going to mention the lean. Wallinu, wawun wa ya'un sukkina. Wow and ya when they are sukkina, when they have a sukoon. One fataha, and there is a fatha qablahuma. There is a fatha before them. So the wow and the ya when they have a sukoon, and before them is a fatha. So this is your a, that's your lean. Then he moves on, he says, وَالِنْحِرَافُ صُحِّحَا فِي اللَّامِ وَالرَّا بِتَكْرِيرٍ جُعِلٍ. He says here, وَالِنْحِرَافُ صُحِّحَا, and the inhiraf is established في اللام والراء, with the lam and the ra. Then he says, وَبِتَكْرِيرٍ جُعِلٍ. What do you think this one is? وَبِتَكْرِيرٍ. What sifat do you think this is? Anyone?
تكرار.
Tikrar, exactly. Now he's mentioning the tikrar. وَبِتَكْرِيرٍ جُعِل. And the tikrar is made. The tikrar is made, it was with the ra. He doesn't actually mention the ra here, but he says what tikrar ju'il, and the tikrar is done. وَلِلتَّفَشِّي, and the tafashi, وَلِلتَّفَشِّي الشِّينُ ضَادَ نِسْتَطِل. So he says وَلِلتَّفَشِّي الشِّينُ, and for the tafashi is the sheen, and ضاد, for the ضاد, istatil, is the istitala. Okay, so this part here was all the ones without opposites, all the extra sifat that we mentioned. Does that make sense? That's just a very brief introduction of the Matn al-Jazariya, but it just means that whatever you've learnt, inshallah, you have the evidence and you know that you have been taught according to what has been given to us by our scholars. It's not just something that I've just kind of made up for myself. That brings us to the end, alhamdulillah. It's been a real pleasure, and alhamdulillah, we just got done. It is 12:30 right now.